I'm going to go ahead with the meeting beginning ritual now. 起立，面向佛堂，参加先鞠躬、一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，参加各位的传习鞠躬，开班一鞠躬，请坐下。Please be seated.
It's a beautiful, sunny, warm, 51 degrees, late autumn day in scenic Indianapolis, Indiana. It's actually unseasonably warm up here right now, which I'm not going to complain about in the slightest. An absolutely beautiful day. The smell of the leaves is in the air. The sky's a crisp, bright blue, and the grass is still kind of green. It's just gorgeous to look at, wonderful to smell. It's a beautiful day for the senses outside, and I just marvel at days like this, where the beauty of creation all around us is just almost overwhelming in its intensity and its glory. There's just something about that kind of beauty I find spectacular. Today I wanted to share a bit about the heavenly mission with you. This is not a topic that we talk about frequently, although it is all around us and all over us all the time. The heavenly mission is the underlying function of the Iguan Dao as an organization, and for many of us is one of our principal activities. And so I think bears at least mentioning from time to time, so that those folks who don't necessarily get to hear about it very often have an opportunity to understand what the term means and what it entails when they hear it. It's not usual to hear the term heavenly mission bandied about no matter where you go. It's a term that's kind of unique to the Iguan Dao, although within the Judeo-Christian circles, particularly in the more evangelical churches, there's a flavor of things like this, which are revivals and outreach missions to help bring the word to the world, if you will. Interestingly enough, the heavenly mission is that same sort of thing. The heavenly mission, in a nutshell, is bringing the Tao teachings to the world. Although in methodology and implementation, the heavenly mission is substantially different than anything you're going to see at a Southern Baptist tent revival or in most outreach missions, but we'll save that for another day. Bringing the teachings to the world for us is a process of evolution and refinement, and not a process of being handed a set of instructions and then being told to go and convert the masses, as it were. One of the things that makes the Iguan Dao as an organization so special and so wonderful is that the accomplishment of its mission work, if you will, the bringing of the teachings to other people who've not had an opportunity to hear them or be introduced to them, is not done specifically by an outreach organization who's bent on the conversion of souls, but more specifically is accomplished by those of us who have received and are cultivating the Tao teachings and attempting to set the proper example for others. Within the Iguan Dao, we teach that the transmission of the Tao begins with the individual, each person with the karmic affinity for the Tao teachings chooses at some point in time whether or not to be initiated, whether or not to receive the Tao and formally align themselves with the organization. They choose at what level and at what degree of effort and intensity they will cultivate the teachings in their own lives, and they choose what they'll do with that degree of cultivation as they go down the path. And all of those choices and decisions, while guidance is certainly available, are not typically subject to a lot of pressure or guidance or instruction from anyone necessarily as the individual goes down their path, unless they ask for it. There's nobody shoving people, for instance, into receiving a house shrine or trying to become an ordained master. In fact, becoming an ordained master is always a surprise for the people who are chosen. It's a process that I don't understand yet. Perhaps I never will. But you know, that's okay. The point is there's no pressure to go there. There's nobody behind us pushing us to go out proselytizing and evangelizing. The process of spreading the teachings occurs naturally as an outcome of our cultivating the teachings. And so as the individual refines and learns and understands and improves their own spiritual path and their own lives, that example is displayed for the family members first, the friends, the close acquaintances, the relatives and associates of the individual, the people that are nearest to them, right? And so that example spreads from the individual to the home, and amongst those people, for those who have the affinity, then also that self-same set of choices present themselves. And for those who choose, once again, to align themselves with the organization and begin the path of living the Tao teachings, then the example is further extended into the community, the neighborhoods and cities and towns, the smaller population centers, if you will, where the people who aren't immediate family and friends of the Tao cultivator begin to see and feel the impact of that example. I can tell you from personal experience that the power of that kind of outreach is impressive. It truly is remarkable, the number of people's lives that I know I've touched, and I can't even begin to imagine the number of people whose lives I've touched that I don't know about. Now, the vast majority of those folks either lack the karmic affinity or have not yet had sufficient time or education to come around to align themselves with the organization. But in all of them, the ones that I know about and the ones that I don't, the seed of the Tao teachings has been planted and has sprouted and is growing. And even though they're in the process of growing into the same sets of choices and decisions that all of us did, the example is still radiating from within them. As soon as an individual becomes interested in and begins to explore and study and understand the teachings begin to transform their lives. And it's a remarkable and wonderful thing to watch. It isn't something that I have anything to do with. I'm always happy to share and to provide what answers I can and what assistance I can and point people in the right direction where I can. But I don't follow these folks around, cajoling and pushing and coercing them into any decisions or choices or or a particular destination. I'm simply there to be helpful when I can be. And yet to watch the process begin to unfold for me is really cool every time. Derek and I have been doing this for a long time, and he's been cultivating for much longer than I have. I actually still remember when I started. His perception of the difference in me between then and now probably is more accurate than mine. But I remember how I felt and how remarkable I thought this process was even way back then. And since then, I feel like I've made some progress, and looking back, I find that to be remarkable. And that is the process of the heavenly mission at work. Now, eventually, an individual gets to the point, if they're cultivating the teachings seriously, where they decide perhaps that they want to take a more formal and direct approach to the heavenly mission and attempt to bring the teachings to others in a somewhat more structured and direct sort of a manner. And at that point, perhaps, is where one might decide to take the Chinko vow, receive a shrine, and begin to put on the public-facing side of the organization, such as Nate and Andy and I have done here, and many people out there in LA have done. We're not ordained masters, but we are one public-facing side of the temple that is in extremely close proximity and contact with a whole bunch of our society that has never been exposed to the authentic Tao teachings before. And having the guidance of the ordained masters and the wisdom and instruction that they provide, and the resources of the temple behind us to add a little structure and a little direction to the accomplishment of the heavenly mission, permits us to do a better job of putting the message across, if you will. Although the message itself remains unaltered, it's still not a message of coercion and conversion. It's not evangelical or proselytizing. It simply is a more clear look at the organization and some of us who are involved in it at a slightly more public level, so that those with the karmic affinity can identify that affinity and find some place to hang their hats and call home. It was specifically because of that somewhat more formal means of sharing the teachings that I came to be initiated to begin with. I came to be initiated because Derek and I started talking years and years ago. Prior to that time, for many years, I'd been looking for a different and better set of answers than what I had available to me in the American Midwest at the time. It was not until Derek and I started talking seriously about the Guandao and the philosophies of the organization and Derek's beliefs in particular, along with mine, that I felt like I'd hooked into something that was real, where there was some genuineness, some authenticity, some real understanding that went along with the keyword proficiency that we're all so used to experiencing these days. At that level, the heavenly mission now becomes something that affects not just a single microcosmic locale, but it affects cities, towns, countries, for the world. And true to form, when Derek and Alex and I speak here on Sundays, I'm not just speaking to Indiana, nor Derek to LA, nor Alex to wherever he is at the moment. We're all addressing several different countries in several different time zones, in several different geographic locations. And this message is being heard worldwide. When I stop to think about that every now and again, the weight of that responsibility becomes kind of awesome. But I know that what we're doing here is what we're supposed to be doing. And the indicators of our karmic paths and our indicators from the Tao itself, the synergies, the miraculous occurrences, if you will, the near coincidences that seem to occur, particularly around Derek and I, that have for years and years, I think tell us both that the path we're on is the path we're supposed to be on. Those things are pretty clear markers that we're doing what we should be doing. And so the heavenly mission grows from the very small to the very large, from the individual to the world, from the very few to the very many. And it happens without the need to apply a lot of force or leverage, because that is not the way of the Tao. If it required a lot of leverage to occur, I'd have to say that we're doing something wrong. This has been a process of several years of slow, steady, consistent application of a reasonable amount of effort over a long period of time. And the consistency with which we've applied that effort has produced the results we've seen thus far. Slow, steady, measured growth over time. And for each of you that we see here regularly from week to week, I'm very confident that there are many more who, for whatever reason, aren't necessarily able to be here, but who still are hearing and following the message. One of the terms that you hear very frequently in relation to both the Iguan Tao and the heavenly mission is a term called karmic affinity. I've used that term probably 24 times in the last 6 minutes, just discussing the heavenly mission itself. Karmic affinity is the relationship between a spiritual entity and, in this case, the organization that is the Iguan Tao, and all of us, soul to soul, if you will, spiritual path to spiritual path. Not everyone in the whole entire world has the affinity and karma for this particular tradition and path, and that's perfectly okay. Some folks have an affinity for other paths. Some folks have an affinity for no path in particular. And those things are okay. The karmic affinity exists because of a degree of spiritual evolution over time. We believe, and in my case, sincerely hope, that developing the karmic affinity for the Tao teachings indicates a level of spiritual evolution that prepares a soul one day to be enlightened, where we've perhaps gotten past some of the prejudices and preconceptions that weigh the soul down, that prevent enlightenment from occurring, where we've moved away from the us and them mentality to a more inclusive everybody mentality, just an us mentality, where the need to be right, the need to prove a point, the need to divide a spiritual path into 400 sects simply because 24 people can't agree on what the doctrine means ceases to be important. And the more important aspects of understanding what is the spiritual nature of a human soul and what is the essence and nature of God come to the foreground to be understood and to be contemplated and considered. Not everyone, frankly, has the capacity to consider their spirituality at that level. And that's okay too. But everyone has the capacity to approach that level, and as I understand it and believe, at some point everybody will approach that level. And if there are levels yet beyond that, all of us will eventually get there as well. I hope with all of my heart that we all get there as quickly as we possibly can. But that's karmic affinity. Affinity is the universal law of attraction that brings two bodies together no matter what they are. One could say that the attraction for the Earth to the Moon and vice versa could be an affinity. If the affinity gets too strong, we'll be wearing the Moon a little closer than we wanted to, and if it becomes too weak, the Moon may leave us. But that's a scientific speculation and not a spiritual speculation. Karmic affinity is important. If our example lands upon the hearts of those who lack the affinity, the point likely will be lost. But the seed will still be planted. And perhaps at a later time, the affinity will exist. The ability to undergo that spiritual realization is an important aspect of the individual's alignment with our organization. It's important for us to understand that not everybody is going to have the karmic affinity, and not everybody with the affinity may necessarily have the spiritual realization at the moment in time when we're standing there watching. It's not so much important for us to stand around and count the results as it is to just set the right example and trust the Tao of Heaven to have the right affinity for the right people and vice versa. I have never seen that process fail in all of the folks that I personally know about, and it didn't fail in me. The combination of the spiritual realization and karmic affinity result in the commencement of a process of refinement and improvement in the life of another person that leads to the awakening and enlightening of a human soul. And that is the culmination of the heavenly mission. To bring about an end to the suffering of sentient beings on this planet and anywhere else we can find them, and to bring about the enlightenment of every Buddha on this planet that's looking for a place to get out. It's important to remember that within each of us, within all of us, is a Buddha waiting to be born. It is the heavenly mission in part that allows us to assist others in that process. One of the coolest things about the Yiguan Tao as an organization is that I'm able to sit here and tell you guys all with complete and utter 100% honesty that if you cultivate these teachings in your lives the way you're supposed to, the results are nearly 100% scientifically reproducible. I'm not guessing when I say that. I've put that statement to the test over and over and over and over again, and once again, that statement has never failed. I've never seen it fail in the lives of others. It's never failed in my life. And I have never in my life prior to now been involved in a path where I could say that. I find the empirical evidence of reproducible results to be extremely difficult to argue with when we want to evaluate whether or not the path we're on is genuine, authentic, and whether or not it works. I don't have to prove what I say to other people. Faith is not a prerequisite for function here. All I have to do is encourage someone else to apply the principles once or twice and just watch what happens. The wonderful, miraculous thing about what we do here in Tao cultivation is that doing that, applying those principles, always produces the same results. Now, does that mean I've got it all nailed down and completely mastered? Absolutely not. Not by a long shot. But those few areas where I've managed to produce some results, I've done it exactly that way, and I know the more I learn and the more I understand, the better those results are for me. What happens though is that allows us to move wisdom into a right and proper example. The wisdom gained by walking this path becomes the example that helps other people to see the validity in what we do and the authenticity and genuineness of the teachings that we embrace. We get to do this every day of our lives for the rest of our lives and probably several lifetimes to come. That is the life's journey on the Tao path. It's a wide, comfortable, easy to walk path where the lessons aren't too terribly difficult and the terrain not too terribly steep. And I invite anybody and everybody that I see to walk down that path with me. It is ultimately the example that we set and the things that we say and do that will cause others to go with us. That is the heavenly mission. The heavenly mission lacks force. It is absent evangelizing and proselytizing. It doesn't solicit money or assets or anything else from anyone. It is a mark of the affinity of one soul for another, of one soul for the Tao teachings. It is the realization of the Buddha in each and all of us. That's the heavenly mission. The heavenly mission is the means by which others are drawn into this universe of Tao cultivators so that one day we all can be enlightened. So when you hear us talking about the heavenly mission now, understand that instead of being an orchestrated and functional activity led by a scripted set of rules, it really is kind of a natural outcome, really, of the process of cultivating the Tao teachings. Yes, it has some structure to it, it has some guidance to it, it has some activity to it, but all of those things rest on a foundation of a life rooted in the sincere cultivation of the teachings and the example that that cultivation creates. Understand that others with the karmic affinity for the Tao will be drawn to each and every one of us as we cultivate those teachings, and the Tao radiates from within us and shines like a light on those who have the affinity to see it. One of the things I talk about more than anything else is the importance of the example that we try to set before other people. And it is for this reason that I spend that much time talking about it. Please don't get the idea that I always get this right. I miss as often as I hit, perhaps more so. But I try, and my heart's in the right place. And I'm not sure we're obligated to be perfect, just willing. But one of these days I'll get there, and one of these days so will all the rest of us. And I look forward to the day when that happens. Thank you all very much for letting me share with you. And I truly hope something I said was useful or helpful to you. Thank you very much.
Bill, thank you. From my observation of you over the years, Bill, I think there is another way that you can tell you're on the right track, and that is, I have observed how the ordained masters have spoken to you over the years, whether it's Senior Master Yang or Master Chen or Master William or the people that you encountered when you went to Taiwan. Everything that they have told you has come true.
Yes.
Some of the things that they have said, I think at the time, struck you as that you weren't sure or not really certain what they were talking about. But then, in the course of time, everything sort of like revealed themselves and fell into place.
Also true.
I remember one of the things that they remarked about you on a rather short acquaintance was that you were destined to be the Hu Dao Shi, which I translated for you as the protector of the Tao. And it struck a very deep part of you because you suddenly realized that hey, they're right. I've always had this feeling of protectiveness of this precious Tao. I've always wanted to, yeah. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, please. Just agreeing with you.
And you've always wanted to do everything you possibly could, like protecting this precious, beautiful flowering of human civilization that it's worthwhile to keep and to share.
Absolutely.
So just to kind of add on to what you said about the missionary work of the Tao, which is taking place all over the world. So I want to let everyone know that the way that the missionary work takes place can vary greatly depending on the culture. There are places, countries where education is widespread and people partake in philosophies, and people are very literate and know about the latest thoughts in the different schools of thinking, humanism, secularism, stuff like that. Then in that kind of setting, the emphasis becomes the Tao itself. So that's when you may hear things like, the Tao is not a deity. If you follow the Tao, you are not following a deity. You're more like following the natural laws of human existence. And if you do that, your life will improve naturally because you're following the natural laws. You are understanding what they are, the natural laws of human existence, and you are leveraging your understanding to improve your existence. Therefore, you will be happier, more at peace, more aware of trouble spots in your life, and therefore, you can navigate skillfully around them. So, the emphasis can be on the Tao. Now, in a different setting, where people are not so aware of this kind of abstract thinking, the missionary work of the Tao has to take on a more stylistic bent. In other words, the expression of everything that I have just said becomes something more along the lines of, instead of if you follow the Tao, which is not a deity, but more like the natural laws of human interactions, human existence, it's more like if you follow the teachings of the Buddha, look at the Buddha. That Buddha has precepts that you can follow, that you can bring into your life. Now, if the ordained masters decide to get into the Tao, not being the deity, etc., chances are excellent that they will just receive a blank look as the response. Now, so they will say, well, if you follow the teachings of the Buddha, when you encounter trouble, the Buddha will come save you. And it depends on whether or not you follow the teachings. The Buddha will be happy if you do, or sad if you don't. So, and that's because a deity is more like a human. It's more of a human-like entity. When you express it that way, suddenly people's eyes light up and they understand. Oh, okay. Now I see what you're going. Now I see what you're talking about. All that Tao stuff, I wasn't really sure, but now I understand. So it's important, I think, for the ordained masters to tailor the way they express the message, depending on their audience. And Bill, for you, thank you also. I have a message from Alex. Bill, thank you for your wonderful talk. I want you to know that your participation in the Heavenly Mission has certainly helped me tremendously over the years. And then thank you from Mike, and also thank you from Bob. And furthermore, Bob would like to, there's a message that I would like to convey from Bob. And it goes as follows. I wanted to share with everyone how much the teachings of the Tao impacted me personally on Wednesday morning. I have a corporate leadership position in an organization which experienced very negative consequences with the election results. I knew people would be looking to me for guidance on how to proceed with our mission and how to balance our emotions. Before leaving for work that morning, I turned to the Tao, and in chapters 42 and 44, found stability. The following words in 42 comforted my heart and opened the gates to my mind to move beyond the pain. For one gains by losing and loses by gaining. And in 44, gain or loss, which brings more pain. So, thanks to everyone, I knew where to turn when I was nearly defeated. So I hope to meet you, Bill and Derek, and the others someday and offer thanks in person. And
let's go ahead and do the meeting ending ritual, everybody. 起立，面向佛堂，持架三鞠躬，一鞠躬，再鞠躬，三鞠躬，持架跪地是一鞠躬，接班一。 鞠躬。Okay, everybody, we are done.
Participate in the Tao meeting by joining us online. For information, go to taoism.net/Tao